I am told, are now declaring that all 31 days only count as one spillage event, and under this framework document, they need another 59 before the EA will ever investigate. And for those of you that have done the maths, if 31 days is one event, there is simply not enough days in the year for that qualification ever to be met. And I will repeat, as you've seen, the court ruled, this should only ever happen in exceptional circumstances. And by the way, that document was drafted by a Simon J. Whitney, and if anyone out there can figure out who that is, please do let me know. The one thing we've learned in all of this, and I hope that as I've illustrated, unlike what comes out of the words and the mouths of babes, what comes out of the mouth of and the words and the platitudes and the endless reports and the legions of over-polished sentences devoid of meaning and content that emanate from DEFRA, Ofwat, the Environment Agency, and the water industry. In the immortal words of Johnny Rotten and the Sex Pistols,
if I get the feeling you've been cheated, good night.
and that ends my presentation.
Thank you, Feargal. Stunned silence all round. Okay. We have some questions, as you might expect. I think you've covered the definition for exceptional circumstances. Robert Wellard's asking, is there a definition for exceptional circumstances?
There isn't, in that it now is up to the courts ultimately. And by the way, I'm not a lawyer, so this is my layman's interpretation. It is up to the courts to now decide what exceptional circumstances looks like. But I think we can assume some of the stuff we've been seeing going on. For example, Rob, I think, is involved in the Avon. And as some of you may know, the Avon in Hampshire, as opposed to the Avon in Gloucestershire. The one in Hampshire is comprised of 5 rivers, the Avon, the Wye, the Nadder, and the Bourne, and they are all chalk streams, and they are all designated, the whole catchment is designated as a special area of conservation. Now, again, this is some of the highest legal protection that this country has to offer. I can tell you that last year, Wessex Water spent 14,642 hours dumping sewage into 5 chalk streams, 5 of the rarest habitats in the world, all of which are afforded some of the highest environmental legal protection this country has to offer. Can somebody please tell me what was the exceptional circumstances that allowed that to happen?
Yeah. Feargal, a lot of people are asking, what can we do about it? What's the answer?
Well, listen, my approach to this is now fairly straightforward. There are a number of people out there and a number of organizations like the Vere Valley Society, and I say this with enormous respect to organizations like your own, the groups involved in this conversation, that have put their faith in the system and for 30 years have put their faith in the system, have worked with the system, have kick sampled, collected invertebrate counts, have taken measurements and surveys and outfall surveys and borehole readings, and they put their trust that DEFRA, the Environment Agency, and Ofwat would do the right thing by them. They failed. My personal attitude is they have betrayed that trust. And I think that's the biggest obscenity of all around here, that they have felt they've been able to do that and without ramifications. So as you now know and is in the papers, I'm taking a very different approach to this. The legal team is now together. The court case is now being worked up, and I will be announcing more details on that. For the minute, at a local level, get passionate, get involved, write to your local MP, write to the Minister Rebecca Powell, write to the Secretary of State, George Eustace, write to the Prime Minister himself. And when you've done all of that, get back to me, because I absolutely guarantee you, you will get back nothing more than another response devoid of meaning and intent and ambition, and full of the same platitudes we've all been listening to for 30 years.
Right. So, and I know this is something that Ash Smith and the WASP guys say, we're playing an unwinnable game. In writing these letters and signing these petitions and so on, and playing by the rules, we are getting nowhere. So, but what is the answer then?
But let's listen. That's my point. Personally speaking, if you sign a petition, you've just wasted your time. If you really want to make an impact at a local level, simply get a dozen people to write to your local MP in their own handwriting. That's way more effective than signing a petition. Ultimately, I am clearly of the belief, as indeed now are some of the most eminent QCs in this country, the real rampant way to teach us is now to take government to court and hold everyone involved in this despicable act of regulatory failure and utter incompetence, and drag the whole thing out into the open. Simply asking nicely again isn't going to change anything. There's been people asking nicely for 30 years. If you failed, and we all have to be open and honest, the strategy has failed. And for me, working in collaboration with the Environment Agency, why would you want to do that? It's delivered nothing. So why repeat the same failed strategy? You have to think about doing something else now. And I'm sorry if I'm sounding quite strong-willed about this, but I know in my heart of hearts, the only thing that's going to deal with this now is to take everybody involved to court and hold them to account legally.
Right, this is quite a tough listen for those of us who have played nicely and got friends and colleagues, you know, in the Environment Agency, and
well, let me be very clear here about this, because I want to separate the Environment Agency into two levels if I can. I, without exception, every time I run into someone from the Environment Agency wearing a dry suit standing in a river, without exception, they are decent people, trying really desperately hard to do the right thing in exceptionally difficult circumstances. But I have to say, and I'm very happy for people to challenge me on it, the Environment Agency, in terms of the way that it regulates the water industry, protects, maintains, and promotes our rivers, as is its legal obligation, it is a failed and discredited organization. And I do not mean that in any way to criticize the people on the ground, the infantry that are out there desperately trying to do the right thing every day.
Good. Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Thank you. So people are saying, okay, so what's the end game? You know, the Environment Agency has failed. So what should it look like? Do we need a new agency? What's the answer on that?
I think for me, the end game to be played out right now, as some of you know, London is, as we speak, London in the southeast is currently running out of water. I know that seems like an extraordinary thing to say, but London is currently one of the 9 cities in the world most likely to run out of water, along with the likes of Jakarta, Cape Town, and Sao Paulo. And I kid you not. So as we speak, a company has been established by the Environment Agency, Ofwat, and the Drinking Water Inspectorate. They were recently given the better part of £500 million to now look into creating for the first time the national infrastructure, because we now need to start importing water in vast quantities into the south and southeast. I've heard numbers involving multiples of tens of billions of pounds to make this system work, to create it and fix it. And therein lies the opportunity. The simple truth is, when I speak to people who know about this, we want to save these chalk streams. We have to shut off all of the abstraction on a catchment-wide basis that is impacting these rivers. This thing that the Environment Agency has sold to us of turning down a bit of abstraction by a couple of million litres there, and we'll tweak that little bit over there. It was always a strategy that was doomed to failure. We need to turn it all off. I happily accept that will create a deficit in the public water supply which we have to avoid. But we now have a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I will quote you a number that I've seen circulated by UK Water, the trade industry. To fix this water supply issue itself is going to cost £22 billion. When you're spending all that money, do you think you could avoid another little bit extra and save some of the rarest habitats on the planet? And that's clearly a battle I think is worth fighting. And we have a once in a generation opportunity to do that.
Okay. Where's the water going to come from if we're not taking it out of the ground?
Oh, well, that's the point. It's over. For London, it's over. There is no more to be had. We know what you saw the pictures of the chalk streams. There's none left. That's why this company called Rapid, by the way, you can look this up afterwards, established jointly by the Environment Agency, Ofwat, and the Drinking Water Inspectorate. And the task of Rapid is now to look and examine for the first time building, designing, and delivering a national infrastructure to transfer water from other parts of the UK, England, Wales, Scotland, wherever, and imported it into the south and the southeast of England. We have no water left. And by the way, that begs a small question. People knew about this 30 years ago. Why have we got to this situation? And I promised I wouldn't swear, so I'm not gonna. But it does beg the question, who the hell was in charge for the last 30 years?
Yeah. I would just say that Robin Price, the Managing Director of Water Resources East, one of the 5 regional agencies charged with finding us water.
Yeah.
He's going to be doing a talk for us. So I think it's the 4th of November. So that's going to be interesting, I know.
Well, can I just flag up something then? Because I did check again this afternoon. That will be the Water Resources East Limited, owned by 7 of the biggest water abstractors in the whole of East of England. Now, what would be their ambition in life and what objective would they want? I wonder. Yes, 5 of the biggest water companies in the country, a power company who runs a number of power stations in East Anglia, and the National Union of Farmers, the 7 biggest water abstractors, possibly nationally, but certainly in the East of England. Now, what do you think their ambitions are? Do not get caught into the same old game of thinking you have to be nice to people. It hasn't worked.
Right. Well, I know Robin will want to address that when he comes to talk to us. So hold that.
I hope he does.
Now, we've got so many questions. I'm going to give up on grouping them sensibly. Gareth Townsend, could the sort of tactics that are more associated with XR, Extinction Rebellion, be effective in respect to these issues? Pumping sewage into the Environment Agency, perhaps?
Listen, tempting as it is, I'm not sure that's the greatest idea I've ever heard. I think there are ways, and you can and you should express your unhappiness, the grief that you feel, the anger and the frustration that you feel. But in terms of the general public and the people in this conversation, could I just suggest for now, just write angry letters to your local paper, but more importantly, work the system. Write to your MP, write to the Minister, write to the Secretary of State, write to the Prime Minister. That will keep you busy for a month. When you have that done, get back to me. And in the meantime, myself and my legal team will take government to court.
Okay. Mark Wilkinson from the Rib and the Quinn says, we're all pleased to see the formation of the new Chalkstream APPG, that's the all-party parliamentary group in Parliament. What would you like to see them achieve or do over the next few months?
Well, listen, Charles Walker and Oliver have been foremost. Somebody asked me yesterday when that announcement was made. I think it's brilliant. I applaud it enthusiastically and fantastically. And somebody kind of said that they were slightly stealing my thunder. And I hope I, with some diplomacy, gently tried to explain that in reality, Charles and Oliver, the 2 MPs involved, or 2 of the 3 MPs involved in this, they were both banging this drum long before I even knew there was a drum to bang. So both of them have my complete and utter admiration and respect and complete and full support. Now that we have the all-party grip, it can now, on a more focused basis, start coordinating that message coordinating that disruption, tabling amendments, ensuring that the select committees and the Parliament is now fully attuned and fully aware, and that when the ministers stand on the floor of the House, they are held to account, as is the system of democracy we have provides for. And I look forward to use the term to George Eustace's feet being put to the fire on the floor of the House of Commons, thanks to the all-party Chalk Stream group. And once again, my thanks to Charles and Oliver. Brilliant piece of work, guys.
You really think that's going to happen, Feargal? I mean, it's noticeable that most constituencies that have chalk streams in are fairly safe Tory seats. I think that's true to say. Are they
okay,
going to challenge the government?
Let me just say something here. I know people think that always associate me with being a musician and stuff, and it's a beautiful thing, because good God, anybody remembers you for anything. I've spent the last 20 years of my life actually working for, with, and against government, and indeed set up and established one of the most successful lobbying trade organizations in this country called UK Music, and have been up close and personal to the passage of quite a few bits of legislation over the last 15, 20 years. When I say that the all-party parliamentary group with the right drive, focus, and energy can most definitely help hold government to account.
Great, okay. Some people are suggesting that key individuals might be in the pay of the water companies. Perhaps you might not want to comment on that.
No, because I take a very simple approach to these things. Is my family know my instant reaction to those things is show me the numbers.
Right.
Show me the bank accounts and the intercompany electronic transfer details, and then I'll believe it. Otherwise, it's speculation, and I try to make a habit of not speculating on speculation.
Yes, follow the money. Okay. My colleague at Bury Water Meadows Group, Ian Campbell, says, are the water companies between a rock and a hard place because they have to supply the water to consumers? Is it the EA as the regulatory authority, or the whole water industry that is the issue? Or even perhaps the price of water that's a problem?
Well, listen, if you ask an economist, do we have droughts in the southeast of England because we run out of water or because water's too cheap? An economist is only going to give you one answer to that question. It's too cheap.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reality of it. By the way, I have no sympathy for the water companies whatsoever when it comes to pleading poverty, and that we would like to try and do this stuff, but we can't because of those terribly bad regulators won't allow us to do it. And by the way, as you can probably tell, I don't have a particularly high opinion of Ofwat as a regulator, or indeed the Environment Agency. But I will remind everybody, during the last 30 years, water companies have paid out over £57 billion worth of dividends to their shareholders. Plead poverty with me again, please.
Is privatization, a fundamental problem?
Well, it's not. I don't think it is. I don't buy into this argument. To me, ultimately, what has created this situation is two things: was political decisions with a small p, in fact, ideological decisions about the price of water, that artificially has been deflating the price of water, and couple that with the failure of regulation, and we know where we are. And I personally, I don't think any of that's a direct ramification is privatization. I'm not sure that nationalizing the water industry as a whole would have created a different outcome. So for me, it's more an issue about an ideological approach that has proved flawed in trying to theoretically create what a competitive market might look like and the price of water that a competitive market might deliver, when we don't have anything like a competitive market. What we actually have is a series of state-granted monopolies cluttered with a regulatory system that is now failed and utterly discredited. That will only deliver one outcome, the one we're at: chaos.
Right. You mentioned Paul Jennings from the Chess earlier. He's made a comment here: £22 billion to fix the water industry, 20% of the cost of HS2, which is the best value.
Well, obviously, I want to get to Birmingham 30 minutes quicker than I could last week. I can see Paul now's about to phone me any second. Quite clearly, the whole notion and particularly when it comes to the children's, and the fact that there are 2 massive boring holes that shortly will be drilled through the Chalk Aquifer. The whole thing is utterly frightening. And again, and I know Paul's been dealing with this on a daily basis, the Environment Agency's approach to dealing with the potential environmental impact of this is utterly inept. We still do not know where the water's coming from for those drilling machines. Nobody's still able to explain what the actual environment impact of any of this will be, not only to the ecology of the Chalk Aquifer and the impact that will have on the few remaining chalk streams that still function at any level throughout the children's, but actually what impact it's going to have on one of the prime sources of London's drinking water. The whole thing, if it were, I swear, under my management, the whole thing would have been cancelled and shelved a long time ago.
Okay, can we talk about demand management?
Yep.
To what extent should we be using water less? Should there be compulsory meters?
Well, listen, the simple fact of the matter is it's another one of those bits of chaos that's been allowed to enter into all of this. Anybody, is demand management important? Of course it is. The good people of Hertfordshire use something like 174 litres per person per day. That's quite an extraordinary amount of water. But by the way, does anybody really think that a campaign, and I use that word advisedly, called Love Water, anybody remember that?
Yeah.
Set up over 12 months ago. What happened? The idea that the water companies are indeed, God help me, the Environment Agency, knew anything about trying to organise that kind of national campaign to try and drive that kind of behavioural change with the consumer. It's utterly laughable. And as the chief executive of the Environment Agency had to admit in front of the Public Accounts Committee a couple of months ago, there was no money, there was no budget, there was no spend. It was simply hoping for the goodwill of a couple of part-time individuals. The reality is central government at a national level is going to have to get to grips with this, because if you want to affect that kind of behavioural change, you are talking about stop drinking and driving. Will you wear your seatbelt, please? And while you're at it, can you all stop smoking, because you're costing the taxpayer an absolute fortune and the NHS bills was having to pay for it. It is going to be a long-term campaign, and it's going to take leadership. And that is the single word that's been missing from this whole sorry episode for the last 30 years. There's been no political leadership, and until that changes, none of this is getting resolved.
Right. There's a lot of questions about planning and building more and more homes when there's no water. Anything to say about that, Feargal?
Well, just to help people clarify, my understanding of it, and I'm not a planning expert, water supply has absolutely no part of the planning system. So from what I understand of it, local councillors, when deciding on a planning application, can't actually take where the water is going to come from into account. That is not to say you should not be asking the councillors where the hell the water is going to come from. And by the way, while you're at it, what are you going to do with all that extra sewage? The simple reason for this is part of this 5-year cycle that Ofwat goes through, where water companies have to develop up and sign off and agree with Ofwat these water resource management plans. And that's where the water companies will make a forecast. For the next 5 years, this is what we think the local population growth is going to be. This is the extra demand for water we think there's going to be. And this is where we need to get the extra water and how much we're going to spend doing that. And that is a negotiation between the water company and Ofwat as the regulator. So if you want to add another bunch of people to the letters, if you've not had enough already, how many of you actually wrote to the chair and chief executive of Ofwat and told them how absolutely outraged and angry you are about what's been going on? And by the way, just so you know, a matter of months ago, Ofwat signed off on the determinations and decided exactly what those plans will be and how much water companies get decharged for the water for the next 5 years. How many of you actually knew that was going on?
Feargal, there are a couple of queries or questions about crowdfunding and how you're funding your legal costs.
I'll come back to all of that in about a month's time if I can, as we will be making a fuller announcement, not only about the showcasing the extraordinary legal minds that have agreed to help with all of this, but also the details of the case and indeed how we intend to fund it and all that kind of good stuff. So if I could simply ask people to hold that thought for another month or so, and I'll give them all the details they could ever want.
Thank you.
A few people are asking about Europe and Brexit. Andrew Barr says, how are the rivers in the rest of Europe? Did they follow the framework directive?
A lot better than ours. And very, very round numbers, and I don't have this off the top of my head, so if I'm misquoting this, I've no doubt somebody will send me a very angry tweet tomorrow morning. I think the rest of Europe, something like, actually, I'll tell you a story. Earlier on last year, I was asked to go and speak at a conference in Northern Ireland. I grew up fishing some of the salmon rivers there. In fact, learned to trout fish and fish for salmon on the rivers or in and around Derry, one of which was called the Focham. And it used to be a really brilliant salmon river and is now very much in decline. And I was asked to speak at an event there, not unlike this one. Local people, passionate, committed, realizing something's wrong, wanting to do something to help. And I was clearly very critical about the Northern Ireland Environment Agency and their guardianship of the rivers there, because they face some quite extraordinary problems. As it turned out, and you can look this up, and I am paraphrasing this, but it is out there. There is an article in the Irish Times covering my speech, and on the Monday morning, the chief executive of the Northern Ireland Environment Agency basically said in response to my comments, and I'm paraphrasing what he said, but the nut of it, we know we're a bit rubbish, but at least we're not as bad as the Environment Agency in England. I think 34% of the rivers in Northern Ireland reach good ecological status, while in our case, it was 14. That was the reference he was making. That was from his peers and colleagues. Right.
So post-Brexit, who holds us to account on this water framework?
Well, you're now, post-Brexit, you're now utterly dependent upon the Environment Bill. And as I have outlined tonight, the Water Framework Directive in reality is dead and buried, and government never said a word to anybody about any of it. And it began in a conversation in Riga in 2015. And as we now know, government's ambition is that 75% of water bodies will reach a natural state, which there is no definition of. That is whatever government wants it to be, as soon as is practicable. Well, that could be at any point between now and the end of the universe.
It's meaningless.
Utterly meaningless. It's yet again, another phrase of overly polished English that's utterly devoid of any content, intent, or ambition. And if you want, while you're at it, write another letter to your local MP and point that out to them. And if this bill ever returns to the House, which I'm not sure it will, but if it ever does, you might want to ask your local MP to get up on the floor and ask them to explain themselves. What is that utterly ridiculous proposition all about? 75% of water bodies as close to natural state as soon as is practicable. I'm sorry. It genuinely makes me beg a simple question. Whose intelligence are they trying to insult? Theirs or everyone else's?
You mentioned holding George Eustace's feet to the fire as a nice image. But I'm still a bit sceptical about this accountability thing. Jeff Brighty points out, or says, re-parliamentary scrutiny. The Public Accounts Committee gave DEFRA and the Environment Agency a damning report on sorting out short streams and asked for a plan within months. What do you expect to come back from that?
In terms of Ofwat and the EA, nothing. But at that point, you've got to go back again and go back again and go back again. We live in a functioning democracy. The judiciary and parliament are the tools that we have created that are at our disposal. Now, I, for one, am not going to waste my time supergluing my hands to the front door of parliament. I will see them in the High Court, and everybody else can try and use the system we've developed and use, because here's the thing, if you get despondent about it, well, we can all just walk away right now and just give up on the whole conversation. So I never take no for an answer. When somebody says no to me, my approach historically has always been, I took the wrong approach. I had the wrong plan. I had the wrong strategy. I need to go away, have a walk around the park for an hour, come up with another approach and dust myself off and get back in there again, and do not ever give up just because it's hard.
So Feargal, would you think applying for UNESCO status for the chalk streams be of any benefit?
We see the irony is in all of this one, that it's one of those beautiful little ironies. This was repeated to me by someone in government recently. In fact, maybe even somebody vaguely involved in DEFRA. What they kind of overlooked, I was the person that began circulating that kind of an idea a year ago.
Okay.
And the reason for that was to try and get some sort of international involvement to help the world leaders safeguard our heritage, our culture, and our chalk streams from our own bloody national government. There, for me, is the beautiful irony. The truth is, it won't change a thing. Because as I illustrated earlier on, as we speak, there are 9 chalk streams already designated as sites of special scientific interest. There are 4 chalk streams designated as special areas of conservation. Those are the highest forms of legal protection this country has to offer, and none of them are in a favourable condition. None of them. And Natural England has failed in their duty to protect those rivers.
Yeah, there's a specific question about CSOs, Feargal, from Julian Case.
Yeah.
To what extent is the sewage spill problem due to faulty sewage treatment works or to treatment works with insufficient capacity?
It's all of the above, and ingress is involved in it. I, for example, have reason to believe that Chesham involves ingress, where because of the rain last winter, the groundwater level rose again. Suddenly the River Chess burst into life, where it hadn't been seen for 10 years, because suddenly the aquifers had a recharge. And the groundwater started seeping into the creaky, old cracked, leaky, beaten up old pipes, and then overwhelming the sewage treatment plant. So they just simply started dumping the sewage into the Chess. The simple truth of the matter is, as much as the water supply network for London and the Southeast clearly has not had the kind of investment required over the last 30 years, neither has the sewage network. The network itself is decrepit, it's old, it's faulty, there's clearly not enough capacity, clearly there's far too much sewage on too many occasions being randomly dumped into our rivers, in my personal opinion, outside of exceptional circumstances, and all of it ultimately is simply an indication of an overwhelming lack of underinvestment over the last 30 years. And I'll repeat what I said. Over the last 30 years, water companies have given over £57 billion worth of dividends to their shareholders. It's not as if there wasn't enough money about.
We're getting we're getting specific questions about issues relating to very local things. People asking if they can get information to you or ask about specific abstractions. Is there a role perhaps for the Chalk Aquifer Alliance to help pull some of these questions?
Oh, sure, listen, absolutely. Here's the thing, I'm just a one-man band by myself. I just happen to have a big loud hailer, and I get the shout a little bit louder than some other people, but if you guys are volunteering to help in any way at all, Libby.
Well, it's funny, we had
applause, absolutely.
We had a Riverfly talk for our last talk, and we had Riverfly coordinators who hadn't met each other. You know, it was astonishing, and
fantastic.
Sort of made those introductions. And I wonder if that's a role for the Chalk Aquifer Alliance, which, as Sharon said earlier, is quite new.
Oh, listen, one of the things that I can tell you right now, and one of the reasons I wanted to come and do this, I suspect some of you know, when you're out there by yourself or a little group of like-minded local individuals, it can get incredibly lonely at times. And just simply knowing that there's another little similar group just in the next valley over or the other side of that hill, having the same conversation and facing the same problems. So praise to you guys for getting this thing off the ground and pulling it together and doing these talks. I think it's absolutely brilliant.
Great. Can we just go a bit longer with the questions? Because I've just noticed someone that's fallen off their bike, had to be scraped off the tarmac, gave up waiting for the ambulance. So Sue, I'm going to find your question, because that's obviously, that was important that you asked that.
So was that we have a private water company?
Yes, go
abstracting.
yeah.
So we have a private water company abstracting water for a village and dairy farms at the head of the Somerset Froome. How can we make that company accountable? I don't believe this abstraction is on anybody's radar. They're not on the catchment steering group and seem to be a part-time outfit owned by the Duke of Somerset. So it's called Witter Water, and in 2009 water had to be rationed as there wasn't sufficient, and another headwater stream had to be tapped into. So I guess Sue's question is, you know, how can they make them accountable, and what can be done about it?
Well, listen, this just clearly on the basis of the information I was given in the last 10 seconds. Two things. The first thing I'd do is go and get a copy of the permit from the Environment Agency. And that should detail exactly what they can and cannot do, and under what set of circumstances they can and cannot do it. And start right there. Start with the permit. Make sure that the grounds the EA have issued that permit on were legitimate. And when you've done that, get back to me. But for the first step, go and get the permit. Find out what they should legally be entitled to do or not.
Are they obliged to give us that information?
The Environment Agency absolutely is, as they're well aware. In fact, the holder of that permit under the Environment Information Regulations is also required to give it to you. But start with the Environment Agency.
Okay, so I hope
if
that
the Environment Agency doesn't want to get it, give it, get back to me. I'll be happy to make that phone call.
Perfect.
One question we had by email, which I'm afraid I can't now find, was concerning what's a kind of good starter kit of data that people should start with for their own river if they're starting afresh, or perhaps they're starting a new group. How do they go about getting a good?
Well, the obvious thing to do now is go through, and I'll send you the link, Libby, if you don't have it, and you can circulate it to people, is the database from all of this Water Framework Directive status report last week. Was now put, the catchment database was put together.
Yeah.
There's a couple of versions of it out there, but that will in effect, do two things. One, allow you to go and look up the current status of your local river or a section of your local river. It will explain what is the current classification, why it is failing to meet good status, and what are the reasons for that failure. Now, that's a starting position. That'll give you some information. That's not to say that I personally believe 100% of it 100% of the time, and I don't. But I can't go into the detailed reasons as to why I think the Environment Agency might not necessarily be perhaps as transparent as I think they should be, but it's a good starting place for most local people. You will see the current classification of your river, what the objective is for it by 2027, albeit as I've just illustrated, it's actually a bit meaningless. And two, what are the reasons for its failure right now? The third thing, and it was a fantastic resource put together coming off the back of the Guardian article. Remember 2 months ago, at the end of July, the Guardian ran with that story about the amount of sewage and the 1.5 million hours. The Rivers Trusts put together a website using the Guardian's data. If you simply Google, is my river fit to play in? Again, it'll bring you up a map that you can zoom in and out into your local river. It will show you where some of the CSOs are and where and how much and how frequently sewage is being dumped into your local river, if indeed it is. So between those two bits of information, current classifications, chemical, ecological status, why it's not good, potential causes why it's not good, and whether or not there's humongous amounts of sewage being dumped into your local river.
Yeah, that's great. We could circulate those to everyone that's here. A couple more comments about CSOs.
Yep.
Keith Reynolds says CSOs are a hangover from the Victorian era when extreme in circumstances actually meant something. So you wouldn't expect to see similar crudities in today's new builds.
Yeah. Can I just say something very quickly that's popped into my head? The court's in my personal opinion, the court is very clear. These things should only ever operate in exceptional circumstances. Now, we all know what that looks like when we see it. And by the way, I am aware that there is a move within the EA and even DEFRA and certainly the water industry to now start referring to these things as storm overflows. I'm going to give you a very simple lesson now in comms and lobbying. They are sewage overflows. There will always be sewage overflows. There is no need to refer to them as anything else but sewage overflows. And if one of you ever calls them a storm overflow, I will personally come round and ring your doorbell and stand on your doorstep and berate you. You've just allowed somebody else to control, dominate, and manage the conversation. They are sewage overflows. It does what it says on the packet. Don't ever forget that.
Thank you. So Keith Reynolds, talking about these sewage overflows, says, sadly, how come today a new drain on the Ver exiting from building works at St Peter's School on Cotton Mill Lane says there's a real carbuncle on the bank, cement bags laid to finish it, proper 2 fingers up to the river. And Paul Jennings says it's not just the sewage system that's failing, it's the urban drainage capacity that is broken too. And here local authorities should be held to account. So we have a new baddie, local authorities.
Yep, it's a good point. In terms of the Ver itself, I don't need to tell John how to suck eggs, but shall we just say that I know that John now has a very good, and indeed the current St Albans Council are incredibly supportive of the Ver. And in fact, last summer, the council did drag in the Environment Agency and Affinity Water to hold them to account. So I've absolutely no doubt that John were to make a quick phone call tomorrow morning, he would find, in all probability, I would be surprised if it didn't happen otherwise, that the local councillors and stuff will be on the bank pretty sharply to find out what's going on with these sandbags, and that somebody may in some way be abusing the ecology of the River Ver in that manner. And Paul is right, by the way. As by the way, Paul is always right.
Well, in that case, he would prefer untreated sewage overflow to sewage overflows.
Sorry, the what?
He prefers the expression untreated sewage overflows.
In that case, overflows. I'm very happy for that too.
Okay, let's make a note of that. Good.
I won't quibble.
So a couple of people are asking if they could get a copy of your presentation, Feargal.
No.
Okay. That's clear.
Depends who they are. The short answer is no, because it's meaningless to you. I know you've recorded this, and I presume you're going to post this up, Libby.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
So could I suggest that those people that are looking for a copy of the presentation just grab the video from wherever the Chalk Aquifer Alliance is going to be hosting it?
Chalkaquiferalliance.org is where to find it.
There you go.
Okay, Mark Wilkinson asks, NGOs have to take money from polluters. Has this hidden the problem?
Personally speaking, I think there's a number of organizations out there need to reflect. I appreciate what's gone on for the last 30 years. I fully appreciate how difficult it is to fund a little local charity like that. But we now know that what we have been doing for 30 years has failed. Some of you know I came up with this kind of slightly crazy idea a couple of years ago of walking the length of every river in London. All of the tributaries of the Thames, is about 200 miles of them, as it turns out. And the number of times I came across the obvious remnants and discarded remains of posts and faggots, going back years, possibly even decades, that people had put in an attempt to narrow the river, to speed up the velocity, to try and improve the habitat. And here I am in 2019, 2020, and those rivers are ecologically dead. What we now know is whatever we've been doing for the last 30 years, we got our end of term scorecard last week, in case nobody's prepared to acknowledge it. Our graduating report card last week said, after 30 years, there is not a single river in England that meets good surface water status. Not one. It's failed. So whatever everybody's been doing, I would urge you right now, think very carefully, reflect on what you've done, and I will again ask the rhetorical question, are you really sure you're that determined to repeat the same failed strategies of the past in the hope they will deliver a different outcome? I can tell you from experience, it never does.
Yeah. Okay. People have been helpfully putting the links we've been talking about in the chat.
Oh, excellent. Good.
Now, people, you may not know that in the chat box at the bottom where where you've got the to field and type message here, to the right, there's 3 dots. You can save chat. If you click on those 3 dots, you can save the chat. That'll save it to your local computer, so you'll have those links forever. Right. Can I also, I think we will wrap up in a minute if that's okay, but can I also ask, Nicholas Sutherland, for example, has put some excellent suggestions about what the Chalk Aquifer Alliance could usefully do. If people have got other ideas about what you think we could do that would be helpful, please do stick them in the chat reasonably quickly before we wrap up. That would be great. Let's just have a quick whiz through the questions. Yeah, there's just too many. I have just remembered one thing, Sharon. We did say we'd mention a beaver talk, didn't we? That I'd forgotten about until now.
We can post it on the website, so I think that would be an easy one to do. So we know that Norfolk Rivers Trust are holding a talk on beavers some point in October.
8th of October, I think.
So I think we will put that, or maybe even just send out a tweet about it tomorrow to advertise it. But we'll get Mark to help with that and get that out and about. So we'll forward that in message to him.
Yes.
That job done, Sam, if you're still listening.
Yes. Now, come on, people, put some suggestions in the chat if you've still got any energy left about what the CAA can do. That would be helpful. I'm sorry we can't quite answer all the questions, but I think
there are lots of thanks to you, Feargal, for a great talk, and hopefully this is galvanizing people to do something different, get writing, get political at a local level, and make a difference.
Now listen, it can and does change things. I absolutely guarantee you, it can, does, and will change things, because here's the thing, it has to change, or we are about to consign not only our chalk streams, but every river in this country to the dustbin of history. And I, for one, am not prepared to allow that to happen.
And if enough people care, then they vote differently. And
it's a funny old game, politics, and a week is a very long time.
So they say. Right. That's been absolutely fantastic, invigorating, a little bit depressing, but entertaining above all. That's excellent. Sharon, anything you need to add?
No, just my thanks for everybody's questions, and my thanks, of course, to Bury Water Meadows for hosting as ever, and to Feargal for giving us some of his time this evening. Feargal, do please keep us in the loop in terms of if there's going to be some new information about crowdfunding and being able to help with that, and also anything that we as an alliance can do. We would be delighted to assist in any way that you think is practical. So do keep in touch.
More than happy to do all of those things, and well done to you guys for putting the group together. I think it's fantastic, and thank you for the invitation. I hope you find it informative, stimulating, a little depressing, but ultimately, here's the thing. Tomorrow morning, wake up, feel energized, get busy. Let's change it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Excellent.
Good night, everyone.
Good place to end. Thanks, Feargal.
Fine.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time when we talk about sewage.
Yeah.
Right, Feargal's gone.
Well done.
Crikey, that was a tour de force, wasn't it?
It certainly was.
We've got some people who've raised their hands. I don't know, probably wanted to speak to Feargal, who has now gone. Peter Hammond, Alex. Do you mean to raise your hands? John, you've got your hand up. Shall we allow John to talk?
Yeah.
John, you can speak if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Have I got my hand up?
You had your hand up.
That was a total mistake. I was probably taking a screenshot so we can share it with the rest of the world. I imagine there's still quite a few people online.
There are 72.
Yeah.
Yes, excellent. That was a really good turnout, invigorating, and hopefully some new people will get some of the messages.
Good.
Pleased to support your group, and wish you every success, and we'll give you as much help as we can.
Thanks, John. And good to hear the VBS mentioned in dispatches there.
Yeah, we scored quite well, I think, so that's good. All right, well, good night and well done.
Cheers. Bye, John.
Bye. Superb job, Libby. Well done.
Thank you. Thanks for helping out there. Never had so many questions, have we?
No, indeed. Indeed. Let's over and out then.
Yes, just to, if anyone can't see how to save the links, it's the chat box. Open up the chat box. There's a little box in the right-hand corner, bottom right-hand corner with 3 dots in. If you hover over it, it says more. Click on that, and then you should be able to save the chat. Does that help, Alex? Thank you, Nicola. Must talk to you about your fish photographs at some time. Right, everybody.
Still can't see Alex. Okay. Wonder if can you share your screen and show how you're doing it, Libby?
Oh, that's
a genius idea.
That's a good idea at this stage of the evening. So, oh no, we don't want to share that. Sorry, I don't want you to see that.
So just to the chat.
That. I'm just looking at the wrong thing here.
Just on the.
Can you see? What can you see here?
I can see the list of attendees. So
yeah, no, that's sorry. It's
just on the screen where
I do know Alex, so I can send Alex the chat. So that's
okay, that's fine.
Lots of people can't see this. Can you see it, Sharon? Am I going mad?
No, I've saved it. I've done it. So
you click on the chat box
at the bottom.
At the very bottom where you would type a message.
And then
right over to the right, there's a little pale box with 3 little dots in. Click on that. That opens up a little menu. Save chat is one of the options.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, we will circulate the link, so don't worry too much. No option menu. Okay. Oh, maybe surely it's not any. Anyway, we'll circulate the links. Right. Thanks, everybody. See you in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you. See you soon.
Thanks, Sharon. Cheers. Bye-bye.